Welcome back, Focus Learners. I am so thrilled to have you here for another explainer. Today, we are putting on our hard hats because we're building a truly powerful analytical toolkit. The exact production title for today's session is G9, General English 9, U04 L03, Analyze Sequence of Events and Outline a Text and Analyze Key Ideas. But honestly, you can just think of this explainer as a masterclass in architectural reading and writing. We're going to learn exactly how to tear a text down right to its studs and then build it back up into a professional formal analysis. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive right into this agenda. We'll be covering our objectives and blueprint, analyzing sequence of events, outlining key ideas, analyzing literary nonfiction, some misconception and knowledge checks, and we'll wrap it all up with a final recap.
Section 1. Objectives and Blueprint. Building your toolkit.
To really understand how texts work, we need to start thinking like builders. Every great piece of writing out there has a blueprint. First, the sequence of events. That's your concrete foundation. It holds the whole thing up. Then, outlining the key ideas is like the wooden framing that actually gives the house its shape. And that final literary nonfiction analysis, well, that's the finished, polished structure that's ready for the world to see. By the end of this explainer, my absolute goal is for you to be highly proficient with these three specific tools. Because if you can master tracking that sequence of events, extracting the core ideas into an outline, and then synthesizing it all into a formal nonfiction analysis, you'll be able to break down and report on literally any piece of writing you encounter. Section 2, Analyzing Sequence of Events, the foundation. Let's pour that concrete foundation. Every narrative, whether it's fiction or literary nonfiction, absolutely relies on a sequence of events to keep the reader grounded. Without it, the house just crumbles. Authors generally use a standard 5-step chronological foundation. You start off with the exposition to set the scene, and then the tension starts building through the rising action. Everything peaks right at the climax, cools back down in the falling action, and finally wraps up neatly in the resolution. Authors use this systematic flow to methodically build tension and eventually resolve the main conflict. But here is where it gets really fascinating. Authors don't always build in a perfectly straight line. Once you know that standard sequence, you can start analyzing how an author deliberately manipulates time. For instance, they might throw in a flashback to reveal a character's hidden motive, or use foreshadowing to drop these really subtle hints about the climax, which builds incredible suspense. As an analytical reader, your job is to spot these time manipulations and ask yourself, what dramatic effect is the author actually trying to achieve here? Section 3. Outlining Key Ideas, Framing the Structure. Let's move to our next tool and see how this builds. Now that we have our chronological foundation, we need to frame the structure by extracting the main ideas. This visual framework here is for a keyword outline, or KWO. This is essentially a blank skeleton. Notice how wonderfully sparse it is? You've got Roman numerals for your main topics and Arabic numerals for the details right below them. The KWO method totally forces you to abandon those long, rambling notes and instead capture only the most relevant, interesting, and important words that indicate the main idea. Let's break down the strict but highly effective rules of this method. First up, you never write full sentences, unless, of course, you are directly quoting the source. Second, you are allowed a strict maximum of 4 key words per detail line. But here's the best part, a really great loophole. Symbols, numbers, and abbreviations are totally free. You use Roman numerals for your main topic words and list the supporting details below them. These constraints are absolutely brilliant because they force your brain to process the actual structure of the text rather than just mindlessly copying things down word for word. Section 4. Analyzing Literary Nonfiction, the Finished Structure. So we have our foundation and we have our framing. Now it's time to take those sequence notes and outlines and turn them into a formal written analysis of literary nonfiction. Specifically, we're going to look at writing a précis. What's a précis? Well, it's a highly analytical, incredibly concise summary that captures relevant details, demonstrates your comprehension, and critically evaluates a source. And this brilliantly illustrates how it's done. We're looking at a fantastic example from the University Ready Writing curriculum based on a 2014 satire written by Andrew Padua, titled My Time Visiting Disney. Let's walk through the 5 specific elements of a précis using that Disney example. Step 1. Introduce the author, title, date, and their thesis. So here, we'd note Padua argues Disneyland is actually the most unhappy place on Earth. Step 2. Identify the support data. Well, he uses personal examples of standing in massive lines and paying exorbitant prices. Step 3. State the purpose, usually with an in order to phrase. So he criticizes the park in order to encourage readers not to visit. Step 4. Evaluate validity. This is crucial. The Prissy notes that while he definitely had a bad time, his experience was limited to a crowded summer day. Finally, step 5. Suggest additional info. Because of that limited scope we just mentioned, the article lacks sufficient information to be fully convincing. See how powerful that is? You aren't just passively reading anymore. You are actively evaluating the very construction of the text. Section 5. Misconception and knowledge checks. Inspecting the build. We have built our analytical house, but before we hand over the keys, we definitely need to do an inspection. First, let's clear up a very common misconception. A basic summary simply retells the facts of a text. A précis, however, is a true analysis. It is not just synonymous with a summary. A précis has to retain the tone of the original piece, critically evaluate the author's claims, and analyze the author's purpose. Think of it this way. A summary just tells you what happened. A précis explains how and why it was written. Section 6. Formative knowledge check. All right, it is time for a quick pop quiz to test your retention of our framing toolkit. Get those mental gears turning for me. Here is your question. According to the keyword outline method, what is the maximum number of keywords allowed on a single detail line? I'll give you a second to lock in your answer. Did you get it? The answer is a maximum of 4 keywords. And remember, symbols, numbers, and abbreviations are completely free to use. Embracing these tight constraints is exactly what helps you build a much stronger, more highly focused outline. Section 7. Final recap. The completed blueprint. Excellent work today. I want to make absolutely sure these 3 core academic skills are completely cemented in your mind before we wrap up. So the crucial point is this 3-part process. Number 1, analyze the sequence of events so you understand the chronological foundation and can spot exactly how authors manipulate time to build tension. Number 2, outline the key ideas using the strict keyword outline method to perfectly frame the main points. And number 3, synthesize those notes to analyze literary nonfiction by writing a formal 5-element précis that truly evaluates the author's argument. You now possess a highly effective toolkit. You aren't just a passive reader anymore. You are a textual architect. So, now that you have the blueprint, how will you deconstruct the structure of the next text you read? I really hope you approach your next reading assignment ready to tear it down to the foundation, outline its framing, and build your own brilliant analysis. Thank you so much for joining me on this Explainer, Focused Learners, and I will see you next time.